Due Process, winner of 25 regional Emmy Awards, including the 2014 New York Emmys for our coverage of criminal justice and current affairs. Due Process is a presentation of Rutgers School of Law, Newark, and the Edward J. Blaustein School of Planning and Public Policy. Studio facilities provided by the Rutgers ITV Studio, Division of Continuing Studies.
I am the independent monitor who will oversee the reforms that are coming to the Newark Police Department, and they're coming.
If he looks familiar, it's because he's been on the front lines of law enforcement before. He was New Jersey's Attorney General. Then he worked on state police reforms. Now, as the Justice Department's court-endorsed monitor, his focus is Newark.
This city deserves the most innovative policing, the best policing that we can get.
More next on Due Process.
Major funding for Due Process provided by the Fund for New Jersey, supporting informed citizens for an effective democracy. Additional funding from the New Jersey State Bar Foundation and the PSEG Foundation, making things better in our communities.
In 1967, Newark exploded, a rebellion fueled by generations of neglect and abuse, inequality and bias in virtually every aspect of Black life, but none of it more corrosive than the uniformed kind, the racism, the violence of those paid to enforce and protect. So unmet demands for reform of police go back more than half a century in Newark. But now enter a devastating justice report, a court-approved consent decree, and a federal monitor. Former Attorney General Peter Harvey here back at Due Process for his first sit-down interview. Peter, thanks for being here.
It's good to be here, Sandy. Thank you.
Let me first deal with what I see as the elephant in the room.
Sure.
Before we talk about what you're going to do, I have to ask you why you're doing it. It is a potentially thankless job.
Certainly
dealing
thankless.
with what are often called intractable problems. Why leave a comfortable, fancy law practice to come do this?
Well, I'm not leaving the law practice. I'm spending time serving as the independent monitor.
I assume most of your time.
No,
Over
not
the
even
next 2
most of
years?
my
No.
time. A significant amount of time, but not most of my time. I'll still be in court, federal and state, arguing cases. I'll still be helping clients sort through difficult issues.
So you're going to oversee reform of the Newark Police
Right.
without being 24/7?
No, actually what I hope to do, and I think I can do, is apply about 2 days a week to Newark. And it's about the time period that I used to spend on the New Jersey State Police when we were implementing the consent decree.
When you were
with that
Attorney General,
yes,
there was a federal consent decree.
that's correct.
And what did you learn there?
Well, I learned part of what you have suggested. That is, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort. But there, I was actually partly running the state police along with the superintendent, and we still have a terrific superintendent and colonel.
This is different.
Joe Fuentes, Rick Fuentes. But it is different in the sense that I'm overseeing the Newark compliance with the consent decree. So the Newark Police Department really has to undertake these significant tasks. It has to do it. What I'm doing is measuring that compliance, and I'm also providing technical assistance. So, for example, I have a series of subject matter experts. It isn't just me. It's a team of people who
All
know
part-time.
policing. Yeah, they're part-time in the sense that their only task is not Newark. For example, I have the Rutgers Police Institute led by Tom O'Reilly. He was administrator of the Department of Law and Public Safety. He's now helping Baltimore solve some of its police issues. I have other subject matter experts involved in this process as well. For example, the Rutgers School of Criminal Justice. I also have the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice involved in this project. So what you do is you bring together a team, and I want to emphasize team, because you need subject matter experts to help guide the Newark Police Department in the completion of these tasks. Think about it this way. We don't tell the Newark Police Department what to do. The consent decree is very specific.
The department what to
yes,
do.
it's very specific in its 200+ tasks. What we suggest to the Newark Police Department is look at these models of modern policing that have taken place in other cities. Look at these examples of training programs, of management programs, of technology programs, and you select which one makes the most sense for you and tailor it to the city of Newark. I mean, the goal here, Sandy, really is to not simply comply with the bare minimum requirements of the consent decree. The goal is to
Although they're pretty intense.
They are intense, but let's bring best police practices to the city of Newark. And the second thing is the residents of the city of Newark, and even those who are visiting for a short period of time, deserve high-quality policing. I mean, those who are in the most difficult personal circumstances deserve a high level of care, patient care. I don't mean patient as in a hospital. I mean patient care. And they deserve an engagement with the police.
Newark police have not been known for their patient care.
Well, very few police departments have been known for patient care, very few. We can look at the cities that have been placed under a consent decree. Look at Oakland, California. They were so difficult that the federal judge there actually removed the leadership of the police department and put in a receiver to run the department because they wouldn't comply with the consent decree. New Orleans.
So let me ask you, so that was based on what the federal monitor saw and reported?
Well, it was based upon the Department of Justice's investigation, and then what the federal monitor observed and reported to the court about their compliance. I should say their unwillingness to comply.
So this is where the rubber hits the road for you, because you're the one who's got to say, yes, they are conforming to what was ordered in the consent decree, or no, they're not.
That's right. And part of this engagement is not a gotcha program. It's not a blind side. Part of this engagement is to help them reach compliance in a 5-year period. What we're looking for is system reform. That's what we achieved with the New Jersey State Police in 5 years. We brought them into compliance with every aspect of the consent decree in 5 years. And literally, I could have moved to have them removed from the consent decree before I left office, and I was asked by the incoming administration to give them a chance to evaluate it so that they could make their own decision about making that application. I also knew that if I filed a motion in federal court that they could have very easily withdrawn it, and I didn't want to bring that level of embarrassment upon the state or upon the state police. So the idea is, how do we help the Newark Police Department undertake systemic reform so that the reforms become institutionalized, the better policing becomes institutionalized, so that citizens and residents who are passing through Newark get a very high level of service from conscientious police officers who are really helping to solve problems. Remember, police officers see us at our worst. They see us at our absolute worst, whether it's domestic violence, sexual assault, whether it's murder, whether it is some level of injury, car accidents. They see the ugliness of society on a day-to-day basis. But what we're trying
and react accordingly.
Yes, what we're trying to do is not let anyone be jaded to begin to look at the community as us versus them, but instead to see us as a collective.
Okay, since 1970, this is with all due respect
Yes.
to the experts you're bringing in and to
Yes,
you.
correct.
Since 1970, we have had mayor after mayor who says, my top priority is to bring the police into great policing that's going to help this community. That's the promise that's made to the Newark community every time we have an election. And here we are, after more than 40 years, with a report from the Justice Department that says we are doing a terrible job, that 75% of all of the stops made by Newark police are unconstitutional.
Well, yes.
And fall more heavily on black people than others.
Yes, and let me put a finer point on that. Even if they were constitutional, the reports that followed those stops and arrests don't give a constitutional basis for them. A yet finer point. The majority of the police department is minority, including a lot of the leadership. So,
but the culture has been there for as long as I'm alive. I've always lived in that city. The culture seems to be more important than the color of the cop skin.
well, you've put your finger on it. It's not race ultimately that determines conduct on the part of law enforcement. It's better recruitment, which is not included in the consent decree, better training, which is included in the consent decree, better management, which is also included in the consent decree. And this training has to be institutionalized and it has to be periodic. And it is a lot of work. You know, when I see police departments that have gotten out of control, it usually is a failure of education and management. And there's a component of it that's recruitment too. So you have to weed people out coming into the system. And then once they're in, you really have to engage in a consistent basis of education. Our own New Jersey Supreme Court recognized this in requiring continuing legal education for lawyers. We know this about doctors, continuing medical education for doctors. Well, you have to do it for police officers too. They need training and education, and they need good management. And part of that good management is a really good internal affairs department as well.
One of the things that the Justice Department report pointed out was that the Internal Affairs Office seemed to be completely ineffectual, was not coming up with any findings of wrongdoing when there were myriad complaints. Couldn't be, could it, that all of those complaints were unfounded?
No, and that's not counting the instances where an investigation should have been undertaken and a finding of misconduct should have happened. Some of that is training, some of that is management, but some of it is a willingness to do the job well, but also there's another component here. Internal affairs should not be only a gotcha organization inside of the police department. Internal affairs also should be a place where officers can cycle out of it and still have very promising careers in the department. Internal affairs also should have your best detectives. And when they do a service, they go into the precincts.
This is something you'll promote.
Well, let me put it this way. It's not necessarily my idea. This is an idea that has permeated modern policing.
But you like it.
I like it a lot. And I do think I'm not alone. There are people in the Newark Police Department who share this view.
Do you like Mayor Baraka's idea of putting a civilian lawyer at the head of internal affairs? Will that make a difference?
It is a helpful approach. Now, one of the areas that Newark will have to decide is to what extent will that civilian lawyer have authority over what particular aspects of internal affairs? Remember, you have collective bargaining agreements. You also have state laws that govern how police departments operate and how internal affairs.
And there's lots of resistance to it within the department.
Understood. But the question first and foremost has to be, what do the collective bargaining agreements, their contracts, provide? And the second component has to be, what does state law allow? Let me give you the same concept. Newark has a police director and a chief's position. Some other townships have this, some other cities have this. So you have to look at what does the law, and I used to resolve these disputes as Attorney General, and Director of the Division of Criminal Justice, what does the law permit the director to do versus what does the law require the chief to do? And you have to have those lines of authority clear so everybody knows what his or her respective authority is.
There's another line of authority that's about to shift, and that is with the Civilian Police Review Board.
Yes.
Finally, after more than 50 years, it seems that we will have it in Newark.
Yes.
It will hear citizen complaints. It will, in some way, coordinate with internal affairs. I'm not sure exactly how that's going to work. I'm not sure that that's been entirely worked out. Will that make a difference? Will that make Newark people feel less vulnerable?
Transparency in government is useful. People have a right to know how government works. People have a right to know what happened in a particular circumstance where you have an engagement between the police and the community and it doesn't go particularly well, where there's injury or death. I think this civilian complaint review organization will be useful. And one of the questions that will need to be answered by the City of Newark and the board itself is what will be the contours of its authority. Again, you have collective bargaining agreements, you also have state law. But I think that having the public participate in the management of the police department is very useful. You see it play out in Los Angeles, where you have a police review commission that does not make findings, it does not engage in any kind of criminal investigation against the police department. What it does is conducts hearings, it conducts findings to determine whether certain conduct was within policy or outside of policy.
But our police review board, as I understand it, will be stronger?
It has some components that go beyond where Los Angeles is and some other cities are. Yes, subpoena power.
Which brings me to something else that's in the consent decree, which is the requirement that Newark police have car cams.
Yes.
And
body cams.
Body cams.
Yes.
Who's going to pay for that?
Well, ultimately, the City of Newark is going to have to pay for it because it's a requirement of the consent decree. It's going to be very expensive, as many cities have found out.
Will it make a difference?
Oh, it definitely makes a difference. You know that now from what happened in Chicago when this young man was shot in excess of 15 times. That video was made available to the public because of a car cam. So it definitely makes a difference.
The money. Let's go back to the money for
Yes.
a minute, because I know I sit on the library board in Newark. We can't get money from the city because the city doesn't have any money. The city already has to pay for your office.
Yes, it has to, there's a cost associated with the federal,
millions
with
of
the independent
dollars.
monitor, yes.
How
over
much
the
money
course
are
of
we
5
talking?
years. Over the course of 5 years, it's about 7.2 million, 7.4 million.
And we know that costs always go up.
Correct. But I think we are limited to that amount for all of the subject matter experts. So it isn't coming to one person or a group of people. It's actually coming to all the subject matter experts.
I'm not questioning
But
whether it's worth it. I'm questioning
no, but it's over a 5-year
where the
period.
money comes from. So you've got up to $8 million there, and then
Right.
you've got money for the car cams, and you've got money for the body cams. And does this all add up
Oh, sure it
to
does.
real better policing in Newark?
Yes, it does. It actually does. And let me share a corollary to that. It is far more expensive for a city to litigate a wrongful shooting or a wrongful death.
And have to
You're
pay.
going to pay millions when you kill the wrong person or when you maim the wrong person.
And you think that's less likely to happen if you've got the camera on,
If
and,
you-
and the police know the camera's on?
If the cameras are one component of better policing. If you have better training, you have better management, you have body cams, and you have car cams. All of these components help to avoid improper uses of force, especially deadly force.
And I think that police understand that. I think what they understand in Newark much less is why you and the Department of Justice and the U.S. Attorney's Office have to get involved in their business. So you
Well,
talked about management,
yes.
and you said that you think management is with you on wanting to make all of this happen.
I don't know that they have a question as to why an independent monitor was ultimately appointed or why the city entered into a consent decree. I mean, it was either a consent decree or litigation over a series of civil
Right,
rights
doesn't mean they like
violations.
it.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean
well,
they're welcoming
it doesn't mean
you.
they don't like it. I think a lot of police officers welcome the training. Hey, look at it from a police officer standpoint. There are police officers who join the force really because they want to be community servants. And the last thing in the world you want is that officer to undertake some action that she or he finds out later was improper. And she or he says, well, nobody told me this. Nobody trained me about this. I was told the following,
So
and
you
you find
think
out it's wrong.
You are one of the most charming people I know.
You're very kind.
Can you win over the rank and file in the Newark Police?
I think the Newark Police can win over its rank and file, and I think it's happening right now. I think there are a number of officers that have been looking forward to getting better training, better guidance, so they can do their work more efficiently, more effectively. I think there are a number of officers in the city of Newark who really want an effective engagement with the community. The community certainly wants it, and I think the police department. You know the mistake we make, and I saw this with the state police. People treat the state police like a monolith, and it isn't true. And it wasn't true when we were implementing the consent decree. You know, the people who were engaging in racial profiling, some of them had never been taught differently. Some of them had never been managed differently. There were others who knew exactly what it was and didn't do it. And then you had groups of officers who were really good troopers. And I mean, the majority of troopers, they were really good troopers. So my point is that let's not treat the Newark Police Department like a monolith, like these are all a group of members who have no regard for the community and are only there to punish people. It's really not true. There are a lot of officers who want a positive engagement with the community, who engage with the community in a positive way. The question is, how do we put systems in place to give them guidance? And if there are bad officers who won't follow the rules, how do we put in a system that identifies them early, gives them training, and if they don't respond to training, deals with them in a fair, balanced, but firm disciplinary system?
How does the community come into this?
Well, in a lot of different ways. For example, the monitors team has to undertake a survey of the community. We have to do it for our first monitoring report.
Don't you know what that survey is going to produce? Don't you know before you start it?
We want the facts. No, we don't. Because remember, this is going to be a scientifically designed survey by social scientists who actually know what they're doing. This isn't people calling on the phone like political surveys to say, who do you like, what do you like? We're trying to do a deeper dive so we understand what the community thinks is going well, because some things are going well, what the community thinks are not going so well. And remember, it will differ from precinct to precinct. And remember, there are multiple communities. There are residents, there's the business community, there's the arts community, there's the student community. Newark is a college town. More of us need to think about it that way, but it's a college town. NJIT, Rutgers, Newark, Essex County Community College, it's a college town.
All right,
So,
but that tends to be not where the problems
well, we want to find out where they are, collect the facts, and use it as a baseline so that we understand what the community sees, and we also want to survey the police community. What do officers understand about their own department? How do officers perceive their own department? Is it fair? Is it not fair? In what ways is it not fair? In what ways is it fair? So we have to survey the police, have to survey these multiple communities, and we have to analyze this material, put it in readable form, and write it so it becomes our baseline. And then annually, we'll survey the community as we are implementing, as the Newark Police Department is implementing changes to see is there a change in attitude. You know, sometimes policing can actually get better, but there still is not a change in attitude from some members of the community. It has happened in other cities.
Well, most people in Newark who live in those vulnerable communities have never lived with a police department that was responsive and that they felt was on their side. That's a lot to challenge. We've got 30 seconds left, sure. Peter, so let me just ask you, what do you hope your first report, when will it come, and what do you hope it'll say?
Well, our first report will be a quarterly report, and the time frame begins from the moment that our team has been confirmed. What do I hope? I hope it'll just reveal the facts, to give us a good baseline from which to do our work and to assist the Newark Police Department in really being better.
And we expect you next year to come back and tell us what you have then.
Sure.
Peter, we do have to leave it there.
Thank you.
For now, but we will be following your progress and hoping for real results. To you, our viewers, thanks for watching and for caring about stories like this one, stories and issues you can count on seeing every week here on Due Process and online at dueprocesstv.rutgers.edu or at youtube.com/dueprocesstv. You'll find the full Due Process archive on demand. But for now, for producer Tanya Bentley, for Raymond, who had this one off, and for all of us here at Due Process, I'm Sandra King. See you next time.
No justice? No peace! Keep it going. No justice? No peace! No justice? No peace! No justice? No peace! No justice? No peace! No peace! No justice? 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 No peace! The people united will never be divided. The people united will never be divided. The people united will never be divided. The people united will never be divided.
Want even more insight on law and justice? Become a fan of Due Process on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter and watch us on demand on YouTube.